My ex-wife, who was in her 40s at the time, ended up cheating with a guy in his 20s. She met him on a flight back home after visiting her parents. They were seated next to each other, struck up a conversation, and ended up exchanging phone numbers. It turned out their parents were part of the same social circle, which made for an easy connection. He had just graduated from college in our hometown and was headed to our city for an internship. I actually met him at the airport when I went to pick up my wife. She mentioned he seemed like a nice young man and suggested that we help him feel less isolated in such a big city. So, that's exactly what we did. We invited him over for lunch or dinner on the weekends, took him to the beach with our kids, and made an effort to make him feel welcome. As time went on, we got closer, and he almost felt like part of the family. He even played video games with our kids and became something like a big brother to them. I didn't think much of it at the time. I figured we were just being good hosts, helping him adjust to a new place. I trusted my wife completely and never imagined there could be anything more than a friendly connection. But looking back, there were small signs I chose to ignore, like the way he and my wife seemed to share private jokes, or how they would sometimes stay up late, talking long after I had gone to bed. I brushed it off as harmless, thinking she was just being kind to someone who needed it. In hindsight, it's obvious I was being naive. Things took a turn when I began to notice little changes in her behavior. She started spending more time on her phone, smiling at texts she wouldn't share with me, and going out more often without a clear reason. I figured she was just busy or maybe catching up with friends, but it still seemed a bit off. One night, she came home late and looked flustered, giving some vague excuse about running into traffic. I asked her about it, and she got defensive, which was unlike her. My gut told me something wasn't right, but I convinced myself that I was overthinking it. After all, we'd been married for over a decade, and I had never had any reason to doubt her before. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from a mutual friend who had seen my wife and the young guy at a cafe across town, looking quite cozy. The friend hesitated to say more, but I could tell from her tone that there was more to it than just a casual meeting. I laughed it off, saying it must have been a coincidence, but inside, my stomach twisted into knots. I decided to confront my wife that evening. I asked her directly if anything was going on between them. She looked me in the eye and denied it, saying they were just friends and nothing more. She seemed so sincere, so I let it go. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and I couldn't shake it. I started paying closer attention to everything, hoping I was wrong, but fearing I might not be. A few weeks later, I noticed she had become more distant, almost like she was somewhere else even when she was right there with me. Her laughter felt forced, and her smile seemed to vanish whenever she thought I wasn't looking. I found myself growing suspicious of every little thing. Her sudden urge to stay late at work, the mysterious calls she took in another room, and the way she'd quickly lock her phone whenever I came near. One day, while she was in the shower, I did something I never thought I would. I checked her phone. I felt terrible invading her privacy, but I needed to know. Sure enough, there it was, a string of messages between her and him, filled with flirty exchanges, inside jokes, and plans to meet up. My heart sank, and I could feel a wave of betrayal wash over me. It hit me that this wasn't just in my head. It was real. I confronted her that very evening, unable to hold back the anger and hurt that had been building inside me. I showed her the messages and asked her to tell me the truth. She tried to deny it at first, saying it was just harmless fun and that I was blowing things out of proportion. But I could see the panic in her eyes, and she knew there was no use pretending anymore. Finally, after a long, tense silence, she admitted that there was more to it, that she had feelings for him. She claimed it started innocently enough, but had turned into something she couldn't control. I was stunned, trying to wrap my head around what she had just said. I asked her if she loved him, and she hesitated, which felt like a knife twisting in my gut. She said she was confused, didn't know what she wanted, and needed time to figure things out. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Our whole life together suddenly felt like it was built on shaky ground, and I wasn't sure what to do next. For the next few days, we barely spoke. I felt like a stranger in my own home, trying to make sense of how everything had come crashing down so quickly. She spent most of her time either locked in our bedroom or out of the house, claiming she needed space to think. I tried to keep things normal for the kids, but I could tell they sensed something was off. Eventually, I decided we needed to have a real conversation about what was happening. I told her I deserved to know where we stood and what she truly wanted. She admitted she was confused and torn between our life together and this new excitement she felt with him. It broke my heart to hear that, but at least I knew where I stood. I told her that if she wanted to be with him, then she should go and be with him, but I wasn't going to live in limbo, wondering what she might decide. She cried, said she needed more time, but I knew deep down that our marriage was already on its last legs. I just didn't want to admit it to myself. A week later, she came back with a decision. She said she wanted to work things out with me and try to repair our relationship. I could see the effort she was putting into her words, but my trust was shattered. The love I once felt seemed tainted by the recent betrayal. We started going to couples therapy, hoping it might help us rebuild what we had lost. The sessions were draining, but necessary. We talked about what went wrong, our feelings of hurt and betrayal, and what we needed from each other to move forward. It was a long and painful process, but we tried to take it one step at a time. Meanwhile, I kept wondering if things would ever be the same or if we were just putting a bandage on a deeper wound. The emotional distance between us was palpable, and though we were making an effort, it felt like we were both going through the motions. I tried to stay hopeful, but part of me was still holding back, unsure if our relationship could truly recover from such a deep breach of trust. Despite our best efforts in therapy, the gap between us seemed to widen rather than close. We had moments of clarity and hope, but they were overshadowed by recurring arguments and an unspoken sadness that lingered. We were both exhausted from the emotional toll, and the strain was becoming too much to bear. One evening, after another intense therapy session, she told me she had been offered a job opportunity in a different city. It was a chance for a fresh start, and she thought it might be what she needed to truly figure things out. The news hit me like a ton of bricks. It felt like she was leaving not just the city, but our life together. I was devastated but tried to stay supportive, even though it felt like a final blow to our already fragile relationship. As she prepared to move, our conversations became increasingly strained. We talked less and avoided discussing the future. I kept hoping that maybe we could somehow find a way to fix things, but deep down, I knew the reality of the situation. She left with a mixture of regret and resolve, and I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered heart and our broken dreams. Months passed, and I tried to adjust to life without her. The emptiness in our home was overwhelming, and I found myself replaying the past over and over. I focused on being there for the kids and finding some semblance of normalcy, but the weight of her absence was heavy. One day, I received a letter from her. It was filled with apologies and explanations, saying that she had tried to move on and find herself, but had only ended up feeling more lost and regretful. She confessed that the excitement of the new relationship had faded, and she had come to realize the depth of her mistakes. She said she was seeking help and trying to make amends, but understood if I couldn't or didn't want to forgive her. Reading her words was both a comfort and a wound. It was clear that she was struggling with her own demons, and as much as I wanted to offer forgiveness, the pain of her betrayal was still too fresh. I knew that our lives had irreparably changed, and that moving forward meant accepting the end of what we once had. The finality of it all hit me hard, but I tried to focus on rebuilding my own life and finding peace with the past. I knew that healing would take time, and while I wish her well in her journey, I had to face the reality that our story had ended in a way I hadn't imagined. The love we once shared had transformed into a bittersweet memory, and I was left to forge a new path forward alone. We were completely smitten with each other. You always knew just how to make me feel secure and cherished. We had big dreams that seemed limitless. Our joy knew no bounds when we learned we were expecting twins, a son and a daughter. All I had ever wished for was to be a devoted wife and a loving mother. We were fortunate enough to find a house just a short walk from your parents' place. Your mom frequently came by to lend a hand with the babies, and she was absolutely fantastic. Emma and Sam grew up so quickly, and you were the most incredible father. You were always there to help out and never missed a chance to tell me how beautiful I was. We dreamed about visiting Italy, a place I had always wanted to see. You often told me how grateful you were to have me as your wife. I would cook your favorite meal, lasagna, and garlic bread. I adored my family. You graduated from college and landed a great job, and I couldn't have been prouder. But then, when your mom passed away, you seemed to shut off from everyone. You began distancing yourself, and your job started requiring you to travel frequently. I wanted to join you on those trips, but it never worked out because the kids kept me so occupied. They were always keeping me on my toes, each of them pulling me in different directions. I did my best to hold everything together, but you kept drifting further away. When the kids turned 10, your father passed away, and we were all heartbroken. You didn't come back home for the funeral. My sister came to visit, and we decided to take the kids out for the day. During that time, she asked me if I suspected you were being unfaithful. I said no, insisting that you would never do something like that. I was so naive. I continued doing your laundry, cooking your favorite meals, and trying to figure out what was wrong. You stopped kissing me and stopped telling me how beautiful I was. One day, I came home to find a note on the kitchen counter. Your clothes and computer were gone, and you had moved into your dad's house. The note asked for some space. I respected your request and gave you the distance you needed. Weeks passed with nothing but the occasional message asking for more space to grieve. I decided to visit you because I was growing concerned. When I arrived, I saw several cars parked out front, making it seem like a gathering was going on. I could hear laughter coming from the backyard, so I looked over the fence and saw a gender reveal party. There you were, standing with a short, stocky blonde woman, laughing and celebrating as a balloon popped to reveal. It's a girl. When she saw me, she screamed and yelled, "Get out of here!" Everyone turned to look at me, and the fury on your face was terrifying. I sprinted to my car, but you managed to catch up with me. While the guests tried to comfort her for the disruption to her party, you unleashed a torrent of anger and curses at me. I could hardly believe what was unfolding. Your father had left you a substantial amount of money, and she soon began driving around in a brand new Range Rover. She would speed by, honking the horn and shouting at me 3 or 4 times a day. Each time she drove past, I felt increasingly threatened. I started receiving harassing text messages telling me to go to hell. I changed my phone number several times, but I still didn't feel safe. Then, the video she posted on TikTok of the gender reveal went viral, and both of you lost your jobs. She blamed me for everything and bombarded me with constant harassing messages throughout the day. One day, when I came out of the store, I found that someone had keyed the word bitch in large letters into the side of my car. I completely broke down. My brother came over to deliver the divorce papers to you. He told me that she snatched them from him and tossed them around the yard, while you just stood there, unsure of what to say. You and my brother had once been quite close. My sister did my hair for court, and my brother represented me. You brought her along, and I was stunned to see this unpleasant woman who had destroyed our marriage. When she smirked and laughed during the proceedings, the judge had her removed from the courtroom. She accused me of being at fault. The harassment only escalated, and while the kids visited weekly, they grew to dislike her intensely. She smoked, drank, and splurged on your dad's money. She even told my children that I never loved her. Then the kids told me she lost the baby, and privately, I felt a sense of relief. I cried when they mentioned that you had taken her on a trip to Italy. I was in disbelief. When you returned, we found out she had been arrested for drug use. Fentanyl was the cause of her losing your child, and she had also crashed the Range Rover. You ended up kicking her out. Weeks passed, and then I received a text from you that simply said, "Hey." I didn't respond, so you came to my door. I wasn't eager to talk, but I listened to what you had to say. You apologized, explaining that you had lost both of your parents and that she had been there for you during that tough time. You said I was overwhelmed with the kids, the house, and all the chores. She had pursued you, and you felt weak. You insisted that you still loved me, and that you never really loved her the way you love me. I asked you if I had been such a terrible wife. You said no. Just then, the kids came back home. Emma saw my face and yelled at you, while Sam simply opened the door and told you to leave. They were 14 years old. My family helped me sell the house, and we relocated closer to my brother, near the beach. We all love it here. I found a job and have started making some new friends. For now, I'm not planning to date anyone for a long while.